So, recession-resilient career. In a stage that we're in right now economically, we're starting to see layoffs, but it's very uneven. If you don't understand the undercurrents of what's going on, it's hard to figure out what's a safe career and what isn't. The first place that I want to start this series in is talking about the industries, because one of the biggest safety nets that you can create for yourself is pivoting into an industry or a company that is going to be more resilient to layoffs and to this current recession. So a safe career is built at these companies, especially during uncertain times, because they are going to be more stable and less likely to let go of staff in an arbitrary way. They're going to be very intelligent and very targeted about it. But for the most part, it's going to be a much safer place to build your career. So what you have to understand is what happens when a recession hits. It's two things. Businesses and consumers both start changing the way that they spend. They both cut back in some places, but other places their spending will remain the same, or in some cases will actually increase. So let's start with businesses and what that means for you as far as finding a good company or at least finding a good industry to land in. Hardware. This is going to be something that companies start spending less on. So laptops, peripherals, really everything hardware-wise, because those can be cut almost immediately. And what the business has, they can work on extending the lifespan. These are things like workstations, monitors, really basic hardware purchases. Any industry that's dependent upon hardware. So if you think of places like Intel, Nvidia, AMD, the major chip manufacturers, they're going to be under some pressure. Intel's already done this, Nvidia's starting to work towards it. They're getting rid of people and they're shedding staff because demand simply isn't there. If you look at Nvidia's latest line of graphics cards, not hitting really the milestones that they're looking for them to hit. They aren't being accepted, and this is probably where a lot of product lines in the hardware space are going. They won't be as significant of a hit as the companies are expecting them to be, and when that happens, all of a sudden you see just these across-the-board arbitrary layoffs because the business needs to respond to shareholders destroying their share value. Their stock tanks so badly, they have to do something. Those are the kinds of companies and situations that you want to ignore. Any sort of underperforming or non-productive advertising, Snap. That's why Snap is in so much trouble right now. Their stock price has gotten beaten up. The company is laying off people because their advertising isn't as effective as some of their competitors are. If you look at advertising on Amazon, it's doing very, very well. Walmart's Amazon advertising is surprisingly resilient. Google is still doing very well in many areas of advertising. So those are effective. Those are advertisement venues where companies that are spending marketing dollars there are seeing significant returns. So those advertisers are going to be fairly stable, while companies like Snap, not as reliable, not as productive, meaning they don't return as much, those kind of advertising companies are going to be in trouble. And again, this is going to be one of those slash in response to every quarter's downturn. It's a bad situation to be in. Any professional services or contractors, there's going to be a mixed bag here if you're working on the technical side, especially if you're in a program management, product management role. Those are very safe. As far as technology teams are concerned, those are going to also be uneven as a client winds down. You could see massive layoffs in one group versus another. So these are unstable. Any of these services and contractors, they're going to be fairly unstable. Anything that has to do with perks and benefits, those are going to suffer. So any of the suppliers and vendors to companies that provide things like meals on site, coffee makers, anything that used to be a perk, those are going to end up being cut back on. So those companies are also not safe havens. And then finally, anything that touches the recruiting and hiring industry, yikes, even automation. You're going to see massive pullbacks because if you're not hiring people, you don't need any of this stuff. Companies are going to cut back significantly on recruiting, hiring expenses, and charges. So that is definitely a bad industry to be in. But there are some things that businesses are going to start spending more on. Like what? Anything productivity and automation is in a great place right now. Technology companies that provide automation, especially process automation, any sort of intelligent automation, RPA, those are all huge areas that companies are going to, as they reduce headcount, they're going to have to increase spending towards these self-service tools, especially in the data and analytics space. You're going to see self-service data and analytics vendors do very, very well, possibly even reporting better earnings through the recession. So those are great companies to be looking at and thinking about working at. Productivity, anything that improves an employee's productivity is going to be big, and that's a very large growth area for data science, machine learning, analytics. These are great safe haven companies and industries to be in. And anything that can help companies acquire and retain customers, those are going to be huge. If you have a very successful CRM, if you have even companies that provide services for sales, marketing, customer acquisition, customer vetting, those are all going to be huge growth areas because companies need to attract new customers. They need more effective ways to retain customers because competition is going to start getting tense. Those are areas that companies are going to be willing to spend more on because they touch directly the bottom line. Let's talk about consumers. Consumers are going to be eating out less. They will be pulling back on your fast casual restaurants. Anything that's sort of in that middle tier of restaurant, those are going to be pulled back on significantly. If you look at a company like Uber Eats or DoorDash, they're going to see some impacts of this as well. People are going to be ordering cheaper, and so their fees are going to start becoming less. But they're going to be able to get drivers and people to work for them. So there may be some balancing and offsetting. But when you look at stability, a place like Uber Eats, DoorDash, any of those types of companies, probably not the most stable to put your career in right now. Any of the mid-range retail, people specifically shift their habits towards the lower end retail. They will be looking for lower priced brands. You see people who are grocery shopping, they'll stop buying the more expensive name brand and they'll go down to the generic, sort of that off brand, to get the same product at a lower price. And so their preference changes. And those companies that charge a middle level price point, whether that's retail, groceries, really any sort of staples, you'll see a contraction in their revenue, and that will lead to layoffs. So those are companies that you want to avoid. Again, back to hardware devices, appliances like TV sets, refrigerators, customers are going to be more likely to try to extend the life of anything that they have. Cell phones are going to fall into this category. Fewer people are going to be upgrading every year like they were. It's going to take a significant reason for a customer to buy a new television set if their television is working. Why bother? That's going to be an area where they can save some money if they can make their TV last another year, 2 years. If they can get another year out of their dishwasher, they will. So those are the types of companies that are going to see pullbacks in customer spending. Most already have. And then finally, real estate. Anything that touches the real estate market right now is just a really difficult place to be working in. They could downsize at any moment. Finance is one of those weird ones where it benefits and it also has some drawdowns. So you'll see layoffs in some parts of the business, and in other parts of the business, there's growth opportunities. So from a stability standpoint, probably not the best place to be. But if you're in finance, all you would have to do, and I've talked about this in other videos, is pivot into a more profitable division. And your next 18 months is probably very secure because finance is typically seen as a recession-proof industry, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. So the consumer spending is now shifting. And you have to think about what happens when. So we've got a recession. People are not spending as much. They're starting to rein in their spending because we have inflation. Things cost more. They are nervous about the economy. Any sort of interest-related expense right now is going up for them. So there isn't as much money around. What do you do as a consumer? You stay home more. They're not going to be going out to eat like we talked about. But when you stay home, Things like streaming do better. Gaming is huge during recessions. Anything content related is going to be consumed more because people are spending more time at home, less time outside, socializing in expensive ways. Anything like a large chain restaurant's going to get hurt, but if you're not eating out, what are you doing? You're cooking at home. So companies that cater to people that are cooking at home, those are going to do very well. And so any of those home type activities, and another one that people kind of overlook is this sort of do it yourself. Any sort of home repairs, car repairs, those are all very good. You know, your Home Depot, your Lowe's, those are all good companies to be working for because people are no longer hiring someone to come in and do that work for them. Now they're doing it themselves. So if you're spending more time at home, you're more focused on making your home better. You'll change some of your spending habits to that do-it-yourself. So those are good companies to work for. Fast food. McDonald's is going to be a great place to work for a very long time. They are traditional beneficiaries. During a recession, people move their habits around. They'll still eat out, but they'll choose lower price. And this is sort of that same move from your more expensive name brands to your generics and staples. Same kind of move. So working at McDonald's is going to be a great thing for the next few years. Probably longer than that, actually. McDonald's has got a great track record of growth. Healthcare is very resilient, and especially startups built around healthcare to scale the amount of patients that a single doctor can take, anything around telehealth and telemedicine. Those have taken a beating, but you're going to see those those companies be more resilient, even though their stocks have taken an absolute pounding. They're going to be good places to work because people are going to be spending on healthcare, but we're not producing enough doctors, nurses, staff, anything that makes a hospital or doctor's office more efficient. And those are a lot of startups in this space. Those are great places. So if you're thinking about an industry to pivot into, healthcare, unbelievable opportunity right now in healthcare, especially optimization. Things like music. A company like Spotify has excellent upside and potential across the music industry. If you look at Apple and Apple Music, there's an area that's going to be a growth area, hopefully, for Apple. And finally, education and upskilling. Any educational institution that's, especially the ones that are offering online boot camps, those are going to be very successful during a downturn and a recession. Government's going to be interesting. Government spending is considered recession-proof, but most countries now are starting to figure out ways, because they have really overspent for the last decade. They're going to be looking for ways to rein in spending. So being in a government position, if it's fully funded, that's going to be a great place to be in. But if the funding hasn't already been allocated, you could be in some danger of layoffs and furloughs. But government spending is typically a lagging indicator because budgets are created a year in advance. So you have that year where if you're in next year's budget, you could skate all the way through the worst of the downturn, not see any sort of negative benefits. So government's another one of those where it's uneven. If I were giving you advice, I would say government is not a good place to get into from a stability standpoint because there's a lot of uncertainty as far as where you'll be next year based on budgets or budget cutbacks. So the traditional recession-proof industries, I put this recession-proof in quotes because this is an uneven recession. It's going to be felt sort of in a choppy way across industries. But utilities usually do very, very well. Mentioned do-it-yourself repairs. Mining and natural resources are traditionally recession-proof because you still need all of the same resources and there are still all the same shortages. Commodity prices are usually pretty stable and in some cases very resilient through recessions. Clean energy, there is a significant push into the clean energy space. So that's very likely, especially batteries, any sort of renewable energy. Those are all going to be safe havens and they're good spots for data scientists. They're fields where data science and analytics are heavily used and relied upon. Aerospace and defense is typically recession-proof. You're going to see a whole lot of opportunity in aerospace and defense. Any diversified technology company, Microsoft is a great example where they have so many different business units. There will be business units that are always thriving in good places for you to land within those companies. They're going to quickly scale back on bets that don't pay off. So getting into one of those diversified technology companies is going to be relatively stable after this very short period of layoffs and consolidation, closing down some unprofitable business units. So that diversified technology is a great place to land. And finally, if you can find an innovator or a disruptor, companies that are truly using this opportunity to take market share from companies who are not going to spend money on innovation at all over the next 18 to 24 months. That puts those incumbents and traditional businesses in significant peril of having a startup enter the marketplace, beat them with better features, better products, better functionality, whatever it may be, and taking significant market share from them because they're simply not investing. And as markets become more competitive, customers will choose the best product, not the best image. So there will be significant opportunities if you can find a genuine disruptor and innovator, especially at the startup that's targeting one of those growth areas. Healthcare startups, like I mentioned, great place. Clean energy, another one. Huge if you can find a disruptor in the clean energy space. Absolutely a great place to land. So those are the types of industries and companies that are going to do very well and very poorly during a recession. Part of recession-proofing your career is going in one of those directions, finding a resilient company or industry, getting yourself a good position in that company, and being able to ride out the next 18 months with minimal disruption to your career.